Okay, thank you to all who are here. We have a couple of our members here. We'll go ahead and get started today. This is the Medical Cannabis Working Group. We do have quorum, and so just to the members of the committee, we will. I think we're going to have some more committee members coming in a minute, so come and go. There's a lot of meetings going on this afternoon, so it's hard for everybody to be in one spot. We are not going to debate a bill today, any particular piece of legislation, but we are going to chat about an issue that has come to the forefront regarding medical cannabis, and that is that we've had some families that have had been registered with the state to legally possess medical cannabis oil, but have been told by their school systems that they cannot have the product on their campus. And this has become obviously an issue for many of the families because they need to take the product during the school day. And so we have three families that are going to testify today, just to tell their story of kind of what's going on with their particular school district. And then we also are honored today to have our school superintendent, Richard Woods, here today, who made some time, made a commitment out of his busy schedule to come talk about this issue as well, too. And so thank you, Superintendent Woods. I really appreciate you being here. And so with that in mind, we'll kind of plow through and try and get on done. We've got families that are here. So, Mr. Joe Albert, you want to be our first presenter today? If you'll come up and if you'll just sit down at the table and if you'll tell us, let's see. I think both of those should be on, and so if you'll just tell us your name and where do you live, and then just tell us a little bit about your story.
Okay. Joseph Albert. I live in Ackworth, Georgia, and I'm here to talk about my daughter, Kiana. Kiana is a 16-year-old little girl that currently attends high school. She is in the autism spectrum. We had adopted Kiana from South Korea. She came to us when she was 5.5 months old, and we learned at about 5 years of age that she was autistic, and so we've been going through that journey. In recent years, the last 2 years to be specific, we have gone through a number of drugs with her psychiatrist to try to take away some behavioral issues that she was having, outbursts, grabbing or hitting other children, resisting doing what the educators were asking her to do. And we tried 11 different drugs over a two-year period, and every time we seemed to get the bad side effects, and or she would just turn into a zombie, and our little girl's personality would just evaporate and go away. So we got to a point where the psychiatrist said to us, I'm sorry, but I don't know how I can help you. I'd like to refer you into the program for medical marijuana. If you guys are willing to do it, that's kind of where the road goes for you. So we did it. My wife applied. And
how long ago was this? This
was over the summer. We just recently got into using it. So we got the card, I think, in October. And then once we had the card, our psychiatrist really couldn't tell us where to go to buy the stuff or anything else. So and we started searching through the internet, got some guidance from some other families and some other people that kind of are fighting this cause behind the scenes. We finally hooked up with a company, and we played a little bit of games with the ratio of the CBD to the THC, and ultimately settled in on a 3-to-1 ratio, CBD to THC. So we had been doing it for about 3 weeks with that formulation, and we had our daughter's IEP in early November. Everybody had been raving at the IEP, all the educators, about how she's been doing such a great job. She's on cue, she's more attentive, she's not making any outbursts. And my wife wasn't supposed to reveal it in the IEP, but she figured, this is a team approach. We're going to get it out there on the table. So she blurts out that our daughter was taking medical marijuana. Everybody was supportive. And at that point, we had been giving her midday dose in her lunch in the layers of the sandwich. And everything was okay. So, they said, let's do this on the up and up. We filled out the forms for the school nurse. We brought the bottle in because we had an extra bottle of the oil. She locked it up in the cabinet, gave her first dose. The very next day, right before her dose was to be given, we get a phone call from the school nurse. We have to remove it from the premises immediately. This is a federal narcotic, and it's not allowed on the school campus. So, from there, we've, tried to work with the school. Didn't get very far there. Basically, the principal's attitude was, this is if the nurse says no, it's no. I tried to get the nurses in the Cobb County School District to engage me and at least talk about it. They felt as though that a student could ingest her sandwich and potentially have a lethal reaction to it and die. And I tried to make them explain to them that they really didn't understand this item, that the peanut butter and jelly sandwich that she got every Thursday from my wife in the lunch was probably more lethal to a myriad of kids at the school. So, it really kind of, came to a stop at that particular point. Their recommendation was that we come pick her up, take her off the campus, deliver it to her, then bring her back on the campus. My daughter being autistic, if my wife comes to pick her up and remove her, we're not getting her back on the campus. And so that was not an option. So, we finally have found something that smooths my daughter out. It doesn't cure her autism, but those behavioral items and issues that I had mentioned before, the peaks and valleys turned into just rolling hills that we were able to, get her to be more productive and really, quite frankly, get our little girl's personality back in terms of who she is. So, we're kind of at this point now where, we're stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Okay, Mr. Albert, thank you for sharing your story. You mind answering some questions if the committee has some questions?
It's fine.
So this is Cobb County, is that right?
Correct, yeah.
And so it's the status right now is that are you taking her out of school every day to give her the product, or I guess you said you're not because it's disruptive to her, and so she's just not taking it during the school day. Is that?
Well, yes, she is.
Okay.
I'll leave it go at that.
Okay. All right. Sure. Okay. Any questions for Mr. Albert from the committee? This is kind of a textbook case of what is happening kind of all over the country, quite frankly, and happening in our state in various situations. Have you and your wife considered any legal action against the Cobb County school system?
We have. We haven't taken that step yet because right when this whole thing unfolded, actually my wife was in a car accident where she actually got hit by a car while walking. So she's now finally rehabbed where she's kind of getting back on her own 2 feet. We thought about it, and we know that's an expensive road to go. When we lived in Illinois, we actually fought for a different program for our daughter when she was in 5th grade because it was either you were in the typical curriculum or you went into pretty severe situation with kids that were had a lot of bad illnesses and whatnot, and you can rack up some pretty hefty legal bills.
Yeah.
I think over a 7-month period we
Yeah.
spent about $28,000, got what we wanted,
Yeah.
but it can be expensive. The school has deeper pockets than what we have.
We had we were aware of one case in Illinois, I think, where a family did challenge the school system, and it did not go to trial because the school system actually made a policy addressing this exact situation. And so I don't know if you're aware of that particular
I am
case.
actually the attorney that fought that case is a friend of an ex-boss of mine.
Is that right? Okay. So you connect, yeah.
But it's frustrating because the school will not engage us.
Yeah.
And we really wanted to sit down and have some discussion. And if the answer is the answer, it's great, but they need to be educated on what this can do and what it really is, and not just take the position that they did, which was no,
Right.
and move on.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Albert, thank you for taking the time to come be with us today. If you'll hang around too, because there may be some other questions that come up. If you wouldn't mind, thank you for coming up here today. So, okay, Mr. Curtis Harris and C.J. Harris, if you want to come forward, just to the members of the committee, I don't, y'all may be familiar with CJ. We had a little morning order by Heath Clark last week about CJ, his story, and so Mr. Harris and CJ, we're glad to have y'all here. Appreciate you taking the time. And so why don't you tell us a little bit about your story? And just where you're from and a little bit about your story, too.
We're from Warner Robins, Georgia.
So the Houston County school system.
Houston County school system. CJ's had his first seizure his 8th grade year. He's a senior now in the 12th grade. He had his first seizure his 8th grade year, January of his 8th grade year. And they went away. We never had another one till January of his 10th grade year. January of his 10th grade year, he fell and busted his head open. That's when the doctors said that he had a seizure. Then he actually had another one while he was laying in the hospital on the bed. So he had his second seizure, well, his third seizure then. So they prescribed us medication for him to take till we got a chance to see another doctor. So we actually took in, did our research, and we decided that we would go to the Mayo Clinic with him. And took him to the Mayo Clinic. They obviously prescribed him the same medication that he was taking, that they prescribed in Macon. So we took those, and it was take 2 pills a day, take 2 pills in the morning, take 2 pills at night. And what happened was it went to a situation that every time he had a seizure, because he would still have seizures after that, it went to take 3 pills in the morning, take 2 pills at night. Then it went to take 3 pills in the morning, take 3 pills at night. Then it went to take 4 pills in the morning, take 4 pills at night. Because every time he was having another seizure, they kept upping the dosage. Then they said they was gonna have to switch his medication if he kept having them. So we had actually got in touch actually with your wife at the school, and she put us in touch with you. And obviously, that's when we was kind of introduced. Do we want to take that route? Do we want to see what medical cannabis can do? And as a father, as you know, your kid, you know, he's active in the sports. You know, he's really good at it. You don't want to take it away from him, but you're seeing, you know, what's happening to him. And so therefore, it was like, okay, yeah, I can't, you know, he's having seizures 2 to 3 times a month. And it's like I'm working, and I got to leave work. I got to come back and get him and everything and make sure he's all right. Then once he has one, it got to the point where we didn't have to send him to the emergency room unless he hit his head. We can take him back home. He'll rest up for probably about 3 or 4 hours, and then he'll be able to maintain and do his normal thing by the next day. But what happened once we got the oil, because we went a whole year with 2 to 3 seizures a month. So we got the oil in January of 2017. Well, we got the card first. Had to get the card, then we got the oil. Once we got the oil, he had his last seizure January the 10th of 2017. And what happened, we started taking all, obviously, like on the 16th or something like that. So I just took the pills away. I didn't wean him off or anything like that. I just took the pills away. So he would take a drop. Obviously, he had to take a drop at 6 o'clock in the morning, take another drop at 12 o'clock, and take another drop at 6 o'clock again. When CJ was during this time while he was taking the oil, when he first started, he was still in private school. He's been in private school since the 9th grade. So since he was still in private school, he was able to walk around with it in his book bag. He was able to take it, you know, anytime it was time for him to take it. And the school system loved it because obviously they hadn't seen him go through all these seizures. So they knew, like, anything that helps. So, you know, we don't have to see him go through it or call it.
So it was never an issue of not having it on the campus at that particular time?
No. He took it with him to school. He put it in his book bag. And, you know, that's how everything played out. But what happened right before school was over, his 11th grade year, I decided to take him out and put him in the public school. So he actually was able to be around more of his friends, but obviously for other reasons as well. But we took him out, and obviously I went up to the nurse's office, and obviously I want to tell them about what's going on with his medication so they'll know. I obviously probably knew that he wouldn't be able to carry it in his book bag around the school, but I wanted to put it in the nurse's office. So when I explained that situation to them, they looked at me like, you know, I was saying he was going to probably be bringing a gun to school every day, because it was like a situation to where she was like, there's 100%, you know, drug-free school zone. It can't be here. There's nothing we can do about it. You know, we're sorry. We understand it works. You know, they were very sympathetic with it, but at the end of the day, they were saying it's still nothing they can do. So I reached out to some people, and obviously they reached out to the superintendent of the school in Houston County, and he was saying the same exact thing. Nobody can bend any rules. So it got to the point where you got to come pick him up at 12 o'clock every day. So obviously, I couldn't work and leave work at 12 o'clock. So, I just laid work to the side and didn't work for the time that I knew he was going to be in there. So what happened, I would go pick him up at 12 o'clock. Quarter to 12. He'll check out of school. I got to check him out because he can't have the medicine on campus. He can't even, ride in the car technically. So I'll have to leave the medicine at home, come and pick him up, take about 10 minutes to get to the house, another 10 minutes to get back. Then he'll get he'll get a tardy. So therefore, it was like it depends. Because you can tell that certain people really wanted to work with you. So it depends on who it was at the front desk at that time. Because some people would be like, we're not going to give him a tardy today. But if it's another person, they'll say, like, we're going to give him a tardy. So we would do that. We carried on that process to the end of the year. What happened with CJ, where we was blessed at, is that he was also far ahead in the school system that he had enough of his credits to pretty much be able to almost be done. So he was able to get in and move on when ready. So since he got in and move on when ready, he was able to check out of school at the same time that he would have probably had to take the medicine. So that worked out in our favor, and that was a blessing. And now, he's still in high school, but the problem is now he doesn't have to take any classes at the Houston County High School. He actually just takes all his classes at GMC, which is the college. So he's just taking his credits from there. And that's what our blessing was with the school system, the fight had to end that way.
Okay, all right. Members of the committee, any questions for Mr. Harris? And in case you didn't know it, CJ has done so well. That was a story that came up. He is signed as a preferred walk-on with one of the finest educational institutions in the country at Auburn University. And War Eagle, there's CJ. So we're pretty darn proud of you. And what you've accomplished, and looking forward to rooting for you as you go over to Auburn. Representative Stovall had a question. Oh, there you go.
Okay. Thank you for sharing your story. And this is to CJ. What kind of share with us your feelings as far as being a student and knowing that this particular medication can help you in your studies, and then all the things that your family had to go through to try to make sure you still were able to take it and end up doing the Move On When Ready, which is a very good program. Mm-hmm. But I just want to definitely hear from you as far as the challenges, being that it was you that it happened to.
Mm-hmm. Well, the challenges were getting checked out of school, then going home, coming back, and getting checked back in. I was missing 40 minutes of class. So when I checked back in, class was over and I was on to the next class. I'll be missing tests, quizzes, but I'll come after school to make them up, missing practice to make the classes up. But when I was in Move On When Ready, I went and talked to the counselors and they got my schedule so where I can leave campus around the time where I can take my medicine. So I wasn't worried about my dad coming to pick me up and all, but when I learned that I can get off campus and all, it just it took some relief off of me, and it was a blessing that I can do all that.
Representative Gravely, you got a question?
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, gentlemen. And I apologize. I was to the gentleman that presented prior, running from a committee that had a vote on a particular bill that we needed to.
All good. We're glad to have you here.
Move forward. Glad to be here. The school in Alabama that the chairman mentioned.
Watch it.
I just wanted to
I
make
am the chairman of this committee.
Yes, sir. I just wanted to make sure. They know about, now, are you still taking the oil?
Yes, sir.
For preventative maintenance, I guess, going forward, and they're aware of what you need to take from a medication standpoint, correct?
Yes, sir.
Have they, it's a friendly question, have they prescribed any type of details of, okay, we know you're taking this, you're welcome to take it, we understand you need to take it? They've been working with you, I guess you could say, on the fact that you're going to need to take it, and and having some available once you start school and you start playing? And
Basically, what the coaches told us, as long as he has medical documents stating that he is on the oil and he needs the oil and it's prescribed to him by his doctor, it's okay. And then obviously that will correlate with NCAA rules as well, because obviously you have to take a drug test just like everybody else. But they was kind of related it to me as they will test him when he comes in, and obviously his THC level and everything like that. They will get a baseline for it. Obviously, if it spikes over that, they know something else is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of how they plan.
Good. So they're working with you.
Oh yes,
Yeah,
yes.
it's good.
And the if I may,
Yeah.
the NCAA is aware of this and is going to be working with you on the testing going
Yes,
forward.
We had because a prior school that offered him a full scholarship to go there, they actually did all the research for it, because obviously that's why they was able to give him the full scholarship, because they did the research and they understood that what was entailed with it, and NCAA gave them permission to say, just like I was just saying, that as long as it's medically prescribed by his doctor, he'll be fine.
And what was the diagnosis again? Or was there a diagnosis? I apologize if I missed that. Epilepsy. I found it interesting, Mr. Chairman, if I may, that I was reading an article today that the American Epilepsy Society has in fact deemed that CBD oil, low THC CBD oil, they said actually cured some diagnosis of epilepsy, and for a national society association to stand behind it, I would prefer or consider that they were the experts in this particular field, and showed, I think some of the numbers were staggering, that it actually helped even with those that had Dravet syndrome, that had never been seizure-free before, were actually after a titrated regimen of being able to find out what dose worked for that particular individual. Some of those clinical trial participants actually ended up seizure-free for the first time in their lives for a period of time. So I found that a very interesting article, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, sure is. Sure is.
He's won a year already seizure-free, and you can tell the effects with his grades too. When he was before he got the oil and after the oil, you can tell how his grades changed.
Representative Caldwell, got a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you for being here, and Mr. Albert, thank you very much. Both Mr. Albert and Mr. Harris, you both made reference to the idea that the schools were telling you not to bring the oil on campus because of the concept of a drug-free campus. Mr. Albert, I know you mentioned that you guys had a CBD oil card. I assume CJ has a CBD oil card. So that means you're working with a doctor. So this is being prescribed by the doctor. Do you have any doubt that if you'd had a doctor's prescription for an opioid and had needed it on campus, that you would have been permitted to store that with the nurse's office?
Yeah, I believe you would.
So at a time when we're dealing with an opioid crisis, doesn't it seem an awful contradiction that we're running into a problem of distinguishing between medicines and which are allowed and which aren't based on? Okay, thank you.
Good question, Representative Caldwell. Okay, Mr. Harris, CJ, thank you for taking the time to be up here. We're darn proud of you, really. I've known you and watched you, so it's been kind of cool. And now to be going to Auburn is even better. So thank you for being here today. Thank you. If you don't mind hanging around just in case some other questions too.
Thank you.
We got one other family that's going to testify today. Jason and Shelley Gilley, whose daughter Zoe is here with them, as well as your other daughter. So we're glad to have you here, Miss Gilley.
Nice to be
Just for the committee's information, the Gilleys have been involved in this effort from day one. They've been campaigning and advocating at the Capitol since the passage of Haley's Hope Act, and it's been frequent visitors here at the Capitol, so we're glad to have you back.
Thank you for having me. My name's Shelley Gilley. I have a daughter, Zoe Gilley, who's 11. She is diagnosed with a rare protein deficiency called CDKL5 and a debilitating form of epilepsy called Lennox-Gastaut. Dravet and Lennox-Gastaut are the two most severe forms of epilepsy. At 6 weeks old, she started having severe grand mal seizures, out of control. They had her on 4 and 5 seizure medications at a time. Nothing helped. We stayed in hospitals most of our 1 through 5 year of life. She was in a coma for status epilepsy. She stayed in a coma for almost 2.5 weeks. We were running out of options. She had failed 25 plus seizure medications. We had a VNS implant. We had been on keto diet for numerous years until it shut her body down, and they had to take her off of it. So when the bill got passed, we were so hopeful. It was all we had left. It was almost a life or death situation for her. And we couldn't believe the results, even just within a week. We were just seeing small things from her that we had never seen. Before she was almost comatose. She never moved. She laid and seized all day long. So after doing the cannabis, she's been on it, 2.5 years or so. She is so active. We can hardly contain her in her wheelchair. At school, they've had to get her own parapro so she can be out of the wheelchair for pretty much the whole entire day except for feedings. She's very verbal. She looks into our direction when we call her name. She's crawling, hitting milestones that we never dreamed that she would. So then we run into the issue with the school system. They knew that Zoe had been on cannabis, but at that time, Diastat and Klonopin were her emergency meds on her seizure action plan, and which didn't work, and in fact almost made the seizures worse. They were coming at the same time every single day. It was like her body was craving that medicine because it was so highly addictive every day. And so I just simply asked if I got her doctor to put cannabis oil, the rescue nose spray, on the seizure action plan, can we do that? And they seemed kind of stunned, and they said, sure. And I thought, well, let's do it. And so we did it, and it lasted about 2 weeks, and then I got a phone call saying that the school system's lawyers said it had to be removed off the property, and so they made me come and get it. And they also, because they saw how well it had worked with Zoe, they wanted to work with me desperately. So we called together another IEP meeting and said, how can we do this? How can we do it without being on school property? And so their suggestion was, of course, kind of like the others, can you come, take your daughter, get her out of the wheelchair, drive her off school property, administer the medicine, bring her back. I mean, physically, she's as tall as I am. Lifting her anywhere to do anything is not easy. So to do that, and she has seizures every day. So to do that would be near impossible. But they do want to work with me, and they are open with working with me. But right now, their lawyers just said it's too big of a liability. They're not willing to take the chance.
And this is Whitfield County?
Whitfield County.
Yeah, up in Dalton, the Dalton area. So
yes.
Okay. So the status right now is she can't have it, and y'all are.
So it's really like a weekend medication, because she's at school from the bus picks her up at 7:30 and doesn't bring her home till 4:30. So that's a whole day. She has to go without.
Yeah.
Without.
Okay.
So.
Any questions from members of the committee? Representative Gravely.
Thank you, Ms. Shelley. I remember you being here when we were first doing that.
I have a picture with you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And she looks fantastic.
I mean,
she really does.
I looked back at all my interviews when I did News Channel 3 and 9 for the Chattanooga News, and every interview she was so sedated she didn't move. And so now when I do them, she's a completely different child. She's making noises, more verbal than she's ever been, moving around. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable.
And the report from the teachers are saying, when you said she's hit the milestones, are they saying that she's a different child?
Yes, absolutely. And they even got to witness, because like I said, they had the cannabis for the nose spray for 2 weeks at school. So the nurse and everyone around got to witness how it stopped her seizure immediately. And they're like, oh my, because sometimes when they would give her emergency med, they'd have to give her 2 doses because the first dose would never work. So when they saw just within seconds that the nose spray was working, they were like, this is fantastic. I mean, why can't we do this? This is great. Why can't we do this all the time? And then we get the phone call from the lawyers that it has to be taken off the property. Too dangerous. Too dangerous.
So just to confirm that, so she was allowed to have a prescription emergency med that would sometimes work, maybe wouldn't sometimes work, but wasn't allowed to have the rescue medical cannabis spray that worked every single time. That's right. Yeah.
That is correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
Representative Caldwell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Gilly, thank you very much. I'm glad to hear that Whitfield County at least is trying to work
They
with
are.
you, so that's wonderful. I have to at least do some kind of branch off of my previous question for the gentleman who
Yeah.
testified before. The prescriptions that you had prior to the CBD oil, was there an overdose risk with that?
Was there an overdose?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And see, this is what happens with those medications, with Diastat, Klonopin. Now they wanted to try the nose spray, Versed, because she's failed so many medications. There's only so many left to give her. Your breathing becomes very shallow. You need an airbag. You need a paramedic there to. I mean, it becomes to where it needs to be in a hospital setting.
So you classified, and I know you don't believe this, but the CBD oil being classified as too dangerous to have on campus.
Absolutely.
Would you not agree that the previous prescriptions you had were certainly dangerous as an accurate description of those medications?
Absolutely.
Okay, so once again, I find it a little bit odd.
It
We're
is
looking at
odd.
two types of medications and deciding what medicine is okay and not okay for your child when your doctor's prescribing them.
Yeah. And even this was another thing that had come up with her nurse at school. She said, "Now, Shelley, when I spray it in her nose, how do I know it's in there?" And I said, "Well, if you get it in there, you'll see it sometimes run out, but you have to hold her nose so it absorbs into her skin." And I said, "But if not, you can give her another dose. That's fine." I said, "You can't overdose her on it." And she was like, that's so cool that you cannot overdose her on it. There's no harm to her.
Which to me would then classify it as not dangerous.
Yeah.
A little ironic that we have
It
a
is
clearly
dangerous
dangerous
ironic.
medication you can have on campus and a
But-
clearly non-dangerous
yes.
medication that you're not allowed to have.
But the medication that is on there now, they have to call 911 and a paramedic has to come to, yes.
I would say
Thank
not
you.
a little ironic, maybe a lot ironic. Ms. Gilly,
Absolutely.
thank you so much. I know it was a long drive from Dalton to be here, so thank you for
Thank
coming,
you.
and to Jason and your family. Appreciate y'all being here and your effort as well too. If all the families wouldn't mind hanging around for just for a minute, Superintendent Woods, we'll turn over to you, and we are grateful to have you here, and I hope you'll take this invite in the spirit that it's given, that it's not as you've heard the stories, not an attack on our school systems, because I know you have lots of big issues to deal with on a daily basis, and that you get hit from all different directions. We fully understand that, but this is obviously something that is not just these three isolated cases. I'm sure we now have 3,500 people on the registry. Almost probably half of them are children, and maybe a third of them are children, and so this is going to be a case that's coming up. So love to get your input and thoughts of if there is a solution, or just love to hear your thoughts.
I think in just trying to look at the legislature, or at least the issue at hand, I'll be honest, when I look at it, and because we are governed by the federal government, there are rules. Whether you look at the ruling and that comes down, that what we have to deal with, it actually does involve both private and public institutions of education. So at that point, federal law is what we have to abide by. It supersedes state law. And I think for individuals, it is something that, for myself as a constitutional officer, I swore an oath to uphold the Constitution, to uphold federal law and state law in my role. And so I think it is, something we have to be very mindful of. It's not anything where I can just freely just give out advice and say ignore state law and ignore federal law. And so I think that, with that, it is not being unsympathetic, to individuals who are out there. I've worked with children, almost my entire adult life. I've had individuals who, had epileptic seizures that were in my classroom, and and had to deal with those things. And so I think as you've seen, it's not that people are uncaring. I think school systems make choices based on their need and their ability, but that's again a personal choice that they work with. But the law, I think, as you look at this, again, I've tried to research it as much as I could. I've not seen anything necessarily within state law or an AG decision that would help in the guidance of that. And that we don't have a board policy as well that deals with that. So, for us, and I think even those the school nurses, again, they have an oath that they have to fulfill, and I think also being employees of of the school system has to be mindful of federal law as well. And I respect all the individuals and their opinions, but for us, that's really, we have to look at the guidance there, and I've not seen anything necessary from the federal law. If we get some type of jurisdiction or I guess opinion, then that would help give us more guidance at the state level and also at the local level as well.
You mind answering some questions?
Sure. I mean, that'd be fine.
Just a couple thoughts, and would love to get your input. What would the state school board, you in effect, do if a school system said, let's say Whitfield County said, well, we're going to accommodate this family, and so therefore we're going to allow it. Would there be an issue with the state school board if that was done in an individual school system if they chose to go that route?
With the state board, I can't speak for them. They are the policy-making entity at the DOE, so and all those members are appointed by the governor. So we work, in conjunction with each other. Again, we are not an enforcement agency. I mean, we have no ability to come in, and we don't have a law enforcement arm. So I would probably have to defer that to the Justice Department, and again, whatever ruling they would decide.
But there wouldn't be any repercussions with the state school board or from you in a situation like that?
Again, as far as authority, I don't know. I'm not aware of authority that we would have to bring a judgment with that. Again, that would be something I would have to discuss with the AG and get some type of ruling with that. But at current, I'm not aware of anything.
Right. Okay. And I'm curious to the families. You can just answer with a nod of your head. Did any of them say that it was an issue with the state school board at all? That was their deferment always to that it's against federal law? Is it okay? Which follow-up question? Do you think there is a solution that could be initiated from a potential board policy at your level on this issue?
Well, again, if it comes in conflict with federal law, that again would supersede anything that a board policy would do. Mm-hmm. Again, my recommendation, if I had to look at it, is that we go through the legislative process. I know the legislative process is sometimes laborious. It moves very slow. It may be something that may require a ruling from the AG. From my understanding, there's been roughly about, I think, 4 or 5 states that have tried to pass legislation or have legislation that address this. Yeah. But there again, they've come in conflict with federal law. Mm-hmm. And that always is an issue, I think, for us as citizens. I think it's reaching out to our representatives in Congress. And I think that is the proper legislative method. Once we have those mechanisms in place, as I said, it's not the fastest system in the world, but it is what we have within our nation.
What would be the repercussions if you personally, if you as the head said, we're going to find a solution and we're going to tell our school systems that yes, it's a violation of federal law, but regarding this particular issue, we as a state education board are going to say, or the board as well, said we're going to allow this even though it's in violation of federal law. What do you think the repercussions would be potentially for the state school system?
Well, potentially, I guess with federal, you could lose all federal funding. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's, again, potentially. Mm-hmm. I would have to reach out and, get clarification from our board and mm-hmm. or at least the AG and see what potentially could do. Again, this would be a federal act.
Right. Just wondering what the likelihood of that really is. But are you amenable to having a discussion with your board about this issue of if there is a potential solution in some form or fashion?
Well, I think you can have a discussion. Now, whether that is a solution or not, again, I go back that we're still in deal with federal law. Right. And for myself, as a constitutional officer, I have to abide
Sure.
by what I've, within my oath. But again, I don't want to speak for the board because that would, I don't want to make assumptions on that, and at this time.
Well, let me take it one more step further, and then I'll turn over to see if there are committee members. If we were to initiate some legislative action, would you be willing to be involved in that? And do you have an idea of what your stance would be, either opposed or supportive of some potential legislative action? Because you're right, there have been 4 or 5 states that have said, "Hey, we're gonna craft state law, and it's a states' rights issue. We're gonna, even though it's a violation of federal law, we're gonna draft a legislation for our state and give some guidance." Would you got any thoughts on that?
Well, and I'll be honest, I have not really done the research on this, and so I, at this time, could not give an educated value. But again, I go back that if it is federal law, I feel that we have to abide by federal law. Right. But as you've seen, schools work.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions from the committee? Representative Gravely.
Superintendent, thank you for being here. I know that's I want to make sure we don't feel like we're cross-examining you or anything like that.
Sure.
I greatly appreciate you being here to answer some pretty tough questions, considering your role and the oath that you took. I'm trying to, in my head, unwrap a little bit of the legal aspect of this, because we've passed a state law that provides for the possession of low THC oil. If the individual possessing it or the caretaker has registered with the medical cannabis registry card. Was there a prohibition in that particular bill that prohibited that individual from going to certain places or being on location while in possession?
There was not. We were silent on possession within educational systems or in the workplace, which in turn would default it to federal law. And that's we were, as part of the negotiation of Haley's Hope Act, we were on purposefully silent.
And my understanding was that the federal, when the Department of Justice either defunded or kind of took a step back from those states that had passed a medical cannabis law. Now, that was not the states, that they backed off from those particular states. However, the question at hand was geared more so toward those states that had just gone with full recreational. Maybe they had a medical, but also included a full recreational, that those were the states that maybe were in question, but that they weren't looking at states or, in a sense, had the opinion that we're not going to bother with those states that simply had a medical. Matter of fact, I think they even went as far as to say if they had legislated at the state level some type of a medical measure, if you will, we were going to kind of back away from them as opposed to just doing it without any type of statute.
They actually stated that the Department of Justice was defunded from pursuing any action against any state that had a medical cannabis legislation. Actually, Congress did. So, yeah.
Okay. So when we have that predicament, or at least that posture of the federal government, and I'm trying to understand if we have a child who is a minor, who the legal guardian of that child who is in possession of the card to give, legally is allowed to possess and give the medicine to the child. The state hasn't lost federal funding because a lot of our dollars are pass-through dollars. I'm wondering if it is more of a hypothetical, and granted, what I don't want to do is disregard some of the governing branches that are out there, the statutes that are on the books, but looking to the extent that in Georgia's situation, we do have a statute that allows parents who register with the state board to receive a card to possess the low THC oil in these children's cases where they are on a school campus. and they have a legal right to possess by virtue of the card, if really it's more of a, well, this could happen, but the likelihood is that it's not going to happen from a federal perspective. And if the state school board is not a board that can implement sanctions, I guess you will, or can the state school board implement sanctions on school districts for doing certain things?
Well, as far as some, looking at would it be an ethics violation or things? Again, I'm just speculating at this point. There's some ability to perhaps remove board. Of course, there could be perhaps some ability to, even remove some funding as well. And again,
is that state or federal funding?
Probably that would be more state. I mean, of course, and it may include some federal, since we basically are pass-through for federal as well. But that would probably be highly unlikely because, again, I think again we're just transferring federal funds on. But again, for an absolute answer, I'd probably have to defer to the AG. Again, this is not something we have
absolutely
dealt with, so.
And again, we're just asking this question, if I may follow up.
Sure.
And I'll direct this to any of the parents. Did any of you have any conversations with your elected school board members about maybe having a local policy decided by the school board that we were going to do this as we work on a solution here at the state level, that maybe a local school board could say, we are aware of this. We also know that these families possess this oil legally, that the state has said that they could possess it. They have traveled the path that the state has required. We have a child within the school system that needs this particular medication. We as a governing school board are going to allow this at the local level.
We reached out. Actually, I had Mr. Pete reach out, our superintendent, but they went back to federal law.
Yeah, that was they pretty much.
Yeah.
How about in Cobb County or Whitfield? Did y'all?
I didn't take it to the county school board. Our principal just shut it down. He wouldn't even engage me in educating him and me. It was done. He said, the nurse and the nurse's supervisor at the county level said, no, it's no. That's all it is.
Okay. How about you?
I have not, but I will. My pastor's on the school board and has grown up with Zoe, so knows the whole story. So I absolutely, he would definitely, talk to the school board
Okay.
about that.
And the only reason I ask that is from a perspective of a lot of times what we deal with up here at the state has been enshrined in case law, or there's precedent set,
Yeah.
and then we just kind of years later will move forward and put it in the statute.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Representative Caldwell, final question.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Superintendent, thank you for being here. And I want to genuinely say thank you for taking your oath of office so seriously. This is those oaths we all take are not jokes. So thank you, and thank you for putting so much thought into it. I'll tell you, we've each taken the exact same oath to uphold the Constitution. And so in the initial passage of Haley's Hope Act, I plainly had to put thought into how do I rationalize the fact that this is in conflict with federal law. I think this is one of those places that echoes back to why in-state cultivation becomes so dramatically important if we're really going to walk this road, because the premise that the United States Congress has taken in trying to govern this facet of law comes under the Interstate Commerce Act. The Supremacy Clause absolutely exists. It does not preempt the 10th Amendment, which says that those things that are not prescribed within the Constitution are left to the states and the people. I think that if we can come up with this medicine, cultivate it in state, process it in state, and use it in state, we dramatically weaken the ability for the federal government to argue they have any form of jurisdiction over it. And so I think it just echoes back to why this is such an important conversation to be having. Thank you for the testimony today. I think this drives back to why I think we may need to start engaging the Attorney General as well for some help here on this particular policy. And my encouragement to each of the parents who came today, please reach out to your school boards. I think this has to start at the local level. Let's get some policies going. We're on record here, so I'll say into the little camera hanging on the ceiling, school board members across the state, please take this seriously. This is something that we have thousands of kids across the state who need help. There's a policy that you could craft and put in place that will dramatically help us as we attack this on a statewide level and across the country and trying to help these kids. So thank you. I really genuinely appreciate your time here, and thank you for taking your oath of office seriously.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks for your call. Superintendent Woods, let me just echo that too.
Sure.
Listen, you could have dodged us. You didn't have to come here today. You could have sent a surrogate, and so it greatly increases my respect and admiration for you that you came and answered some tough questions. And I know this is a tough spot. I know that you care about families. I know you do. And so help us as we meander this path of trying to find a solution that does work, that satisfies the needs of our citizens, but also does make sure we make prudent, smart decisions. So I just ask for your help as we continue to do that. So thank you,
Will.
Superintendent
Thank you
Woods.
very much.
Appreciate it. Members of the committee, thank you. This has been very good and informative. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe we might see potential legislation addressing this that maybe could find its way into a bill somewhere before day 40. So thank you, members, and we are adjourned. Thank you.